And if I may actually start with, with you, Mr. Gene Senator. A very good presentation, very interesting, especially when it comes to biofuels you talked about. I mean, there are attempts being made to mix, biofuels plus, of course, hydrocarbons. And you talked about the aeroplane, but there are attempts in several parts of the world, actually even India, to try aeroplane running on the mix of 90% maybe jet fuel and 10% biofuel. But how do you look at this scenario? Do you think that even, for instance, technically or technologically you have an option, what impact it might have on agriculture, farmers, agrarian economy as a whole, especially for economies like India?
No, you're absolutely correct. I didn't mean, when I talk about aeroplane, I said aeroplane will run with fuels and not electrical. There is one solar panel plane, but it's purely a demonstration. So in the airplane, it's true that the biofuel has been incorporated, including 100% biofuels in the airplane. So it will be done. But I think, given the availability today, biofuels represent maybe 5% in the most advanced countries of the total fuels consumption, road and plane included. To go maybe to 10%, from 5 to 10, will be already a major effort in terms of investment, wood availability, resources. I'm talking about wood because you don't want to compete with food products. So it will happen with time. It will require major effort. It will be positive for the ag industry and the farmers. But I doubt, at least in the foreseeable, I was talking about 2040, that it would be much easier to go beyond the 10% incorporation, or maybe 15, let's say, that I was mentioning.
Tell me, I mean, I'm a little bit familiar, but still, I may sound a bit completely ignorant, but let me ask this question for the sake of it. Is there any chance of France or your company or some people coming up with a kind of solution so that the world can still use hydrocarbons? We can still use petrol and diesel with zero emission. Any chance?
Zero emission, I think some people are working to capture CO2 at the exhaust of a car and convert it into a kind of calcaire, lime product that is stored in the trunk. Maybe someday it will work. So far it's not working so much. I think we can greatly...
You don't sound very optimistic.
I think we can greatly, only if in the US, in many countries in the world, they go from SUV to new injection engine, you divide by 2 the overall carbon emission from vehicles. So that's it. I mean, if you in India, you need to adopt, when you go to cars, you need to adopt the latest generation. Consumption of cars have been decreasing a lot. I mean,
so you think zero emission is utopia?
I don't see any technology realistic right now embarked on a car to do zero emission. So, but en français on dit ne jamais dire jamais. So maybe somebody will invent something. But I think dividing by 2, it's already affordable. And for a country like India, you need to go to new motorization. Injection, because it's 20% more efficient than ignition engine, ignited engine, and new motorization. That's already a good way to decrease your emission.
If I may turn to you, Mr. Hossain, France has done remarkably well in terms of nuclear power. In fact, still remains a kind of inspiration for many countries, including India, China, and several others. And whenever the country is venturing or diversifying to nuclear power, people give example of France, because you are not Saudi Arabia, you are not the United States, and therefore you had no alternative but to invest more in nuclear power. But is that love affair, France love affair with nuclear power ending now?
The objective of the French government, and it's in the French law, is to limit the level in the future, to limit the level of nuclear in the electricity mix to 50%. We are around at 75% now. It depends actually on the level of hydropower. When we have a dry year, the share of nuclear goes up. When we have a wet year, it goes down. But it's around 3/4 of electricity production. The objective in France is to increase the share of renewables. We have a large chunk of hydropower, especially in the Alps. It's around 15% of our power supply, but we are increasing the share of solar and wind in particular because of the various advantages of renewables first, and secondly because their costs have been decreasing massively. So as in the future the share of renewable will go up, the share of nuclear will come down. The idea is basically to have a more balanced basket, and 50% is still very, very high compared to many, many countries, and is to diversify the mix, to diversify the risks, and to tap the benefits of lower cost and the various benefits of other non-emitting power supply. So, and of course, there are some issues among the population about the safety of nuclear energy, and also the issue about the waste, how to deal with the waste. So this is also some points that have been taken into account in putting that objective.
Yeah, but there is nothing wrong with a love affair coming to an end, because all love affairs sooner or later come to an end. So I don't think you should worry about that.
It was a very rational love affair. I think it was a very rational choice from start. The first objective was actually security of supply, because you know when the nuclear program was launched in France after the first oil shock, the power supply in France was depending on oil by 75%. So really the first oil shock has been really a shock for the French economy. So the first objective was security of supply, and then we saw the benefits in terms of climate, of global warming, and in terms of cost. Now new nuclear is pretty costly, so there are other solutions that have the same benefits. So I think it's more an evolution of technologies than the question of end of a love affair. But that's my personal view. Maybe the ambassador has another opinion.
On love affair.
No, yeah, I don't know if you speak about love affair because we are French, but I just want to say that we say histoire d'amour en français.
Okay, just one before I come to you, just one question, Mr. Hussain, since your institute works on new technology also. When you look at global energy mix, let's say 50 years from now, what do you think is going to be the kind of share of nuclear power in the global energy? Would it go up with India, China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, UAE, Saudi Arabia building more nuclear power plants, or you think it actually will come down? Now, because China has also started now slowing down a bit when it comes to nuclear power. So 50 years from now, nuclear power.
At global level, it's 50 years from now is difficult. In the coming 10 to 20 years, probably plateau and slightly decline, but with a strong increase in China, probably India, and in emerging countries. Basically, what you see is a continued increase in emerging economies and a plateau, if not a decrease, in certain developed countries. But things might change. 50 years from now, it's far away. It will depend also, I think, on the progress in terms of cost effectiveness of new nuclear plant. This is a challenge for the nuclear industry to bring down the cost, especially compared to intermittent renewable.
If I may turn to you, Mr. Fornas, quickly, and when you look at French cooperation with India in the energy sector, what exactly is today, I'm talking today, solar of course, nuclear and all that, what exactly looks like is going to be the kind of cockpit, you know, which is going to lead cooperation between our country and your country in terms of energy?
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. So I will briefly first explain who we are, because not everybody might know in this room who is French Development Agency. So we are a public institution, a development finance institution. We're the main operator for French bilateral cooperation. And we have committed, just as an example, last year in 2017, we have committed more than 10 billion euros in 100 countries. We're hoping to reach 11 billion euros this year, so which becomes significant. But more about India, we have been working here for the last 10 years, and we have already provided more than $2.5 billion of total commitments between our three main tools. So AFD working with the public sector, our private sector subsidiary called Proparco working with the private sector, and finally a new fund which is implemented, which has already begun its intervention in India, called STOA, which was used very recently to promote wind power in India. So I guess my intervention will nicely complete with the other intervention of this panel, due to the fact that you might say that as AFD we have a rational love affair with renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we are not at all involved into fossil fuels, because France was hosting COP21, and as a public French bilateral cooperation, it has been decided that we would be the first donor to be 100% compliant with the fight against climate change and with the Paris Agreement. So this is a very, very big step for us. It has been very recently announced officially. So meaning that in India, we are investing strongly into both energy efficiency and renewable energy. Maybe in order to discuss about, so clearly it's very well part of the energy transition which was explained to us in detail by Honorable Minister this morning. Maybe a few points which I want to raise is the fact that we are trying to promote innovations on this sector, on green energy, and but we feel that innovation should not be just technical. They should first be institutional, with a proper regulation framework in order to make sure that the private operators who are investing hugely in India into this sector can have a safe environment. And I'm referring especially to PP agreements to be properly enforced and to be safely regulated by the government. So this is the first part of the institutional innovations. I wanted also to highlight the importance of financial innovations. Just to give you a few examples, we were proud to be one of the first two donors with our colleagues from KfW to invest into ESL. So ESL for energy efficiency, it's a ESCO model. It was the very first example of this in India. It's a huge success story. It's even considering intervening into other countries than India. So I guess it's very good example of this kind of financial innovations. We are also working together with ISA, with International Solar Alliance, on a de-risking mechanism to promote private interventions into the solar investments. We're working with our colleagues, our European colleagues, EIB and the European Union, on a de-risking mechanism for the off-grid solar sector, also very important. So these are kind of the things we want to promote. There are going to be huge announcements during next week at the General Assembly of ISA regarding this. And maybe to finish with my short intervention on the fact that also the technological innovation should be there. Just to give you a few examples, we're working on floating solar, we're working with on hybrid systems. We're working clearly on how to cope with energy fluctuations. This has to be coped with at local level, with smart grids, with local storage. It has been raised this morning. However, we also feel that this huge influx of variability in the energy sector should be treated also at the national level or regional level with systems like pump storage schemes, very important, huge batteries, reservoir hydro, and also all kind of intervention at different scales. So we are proud to be part of this, all these innovations and to support India in this matter.
Thank you very much. You see, there is nothing more potent, more visible than energy which unites our world, brings countries together, India and France here we're discussing, or for that matter, you know, India and many other countries, and France and many other countries. As he said, there's nothing more global than energy, and there is nothing more potent, more important, you know, which unites the world, brings people together, brings societies together, brings countries together, brings continents together. And that's why we have this conference, that's why we have this focus on France, because this is how gradually we are changing the global landscape, making our world a better place, and making our world a little more happier place. And energy will continue to play this role for decades and decades and centuries to come. Form may change, you know, architecture may change, but without energy, world can't move today, and world will not be able to move even 500 years from now, because it's nothing, it's all about energy. The very source of our living, the very source of our existence is sun. My friends might agree or might not agree. People say sun is the best nuclear reactor created by God. Well, with these words, thank you. And a big thanks to the panel here.